If you're like most people who want to sound smart when you speak, you probably want a bigger vocabulary. You could always get out your trusty dictionary, work your way through the pages, memorizing every single word that it contains. But that's pretty tedious and, quite frankly, pretty dull. In this video, I'm going to share a better way to expand your vocabulary so you can improve your speaking. This is a method that I've used for many years. It has helped me improve my English communication as well as foreign languages like Japanese and French. So whether you are a native English speaker or a non-native English speaker, what you learn in this video will definitely help you expand your vocabulary and memorize the vocabulary that you learn. Let's get started. Number 1, find new vocabulary. So when you are looking at expanding your vocabulary, the very first thing that you need to do is to actually find new vocabulary to memorize and to remember. And essentially what you're doing here is you're widening your input to find new vocabulary that you can put in to your mental dictionary. The problem many people have, me included, is that we expose ourselves to the same content and the same vocabulary all of the time. We watch the same TV shows, we watch the same movies, we watch the same news stations all of the time. You probably read the same books, you probably listen to the same podcast episodes, you probably speak to the same people all of the time. This means you are constantly putting in the same words, the same vocabulary, the same level of communication into your mind. Now, there is generally nothing wrong with that. When you want to relax, familiarity is a good thing. It helps you to relax. You can sit down to the same TV show that you like and that you adore and feel relaxed when you're watching it. But when it's done constantly and over a long period of time, you don't give yourself a chance to expand your vocabulary because you are constantly exposing yourself to the same communication, the same vocabulary, the same conversations all of the time. All you're doing is repeating and reinforcing what you already know. But in order to learn new words, in order to expand your vocabulary, you need to expose yourself to those new words. So how do you do that? You need to widen your input. You need to expose yourself to new conversations, new content, new mediums that will help you learn the new words that you need to learn. You need to increase the level of difficulty in the content that you consume. And you need to broaden the topics or the genre that you consume. Or you need to do both of the above. For example, I often listen to podcasts about entrepreneurship. I could start to listen to podcasts about political interviews with business leaders, or even historical shows on podcasts. This would help to expose me to a different genre, a different type of vocabulary, help me to expand my vocabulary so I can then go on and use it in my communication. If the magazines that you read are generally fashion magazines, beauty or lifestyle magazines, try to pick up magazines like National Geographic or The Economist. Read those types of articles, expose yourself to that type of vocabulary that they use in those magazines. And let's not forget about social media, right? If you spend all of your time scrolling through Instagram, doing that mindless, mind-numbing scroll, looking at images and pictures of what other people have posted about their life and about their holidays, switch off Instagram, switch off social media, go to YouTube and learn about a topic that you want to learn about. Pick up a book that you have been wanting to read, something that's going to teach you something new. It's all about widening your input, exposing yourself to new content, to different content that you don't normally consume. That will help to expose you to new vocabulary so you can learn that new vocabulary and put it in your mental dictionary. If you are more of an app person and you want to look at what apps can help you improve your vocabulary, there are a number of different apps out there. Just simply do a Google search and you will find a ton of them. But 3 that I can recommend to you are vocabulary.com, Vocabulary Builder by Magoosh, and a word a day widget. So these are apps that will help you expand your vocabulary. They will show you and introduce to you a new word every day to help you expand your vocabulary and to help you widen your input as well. These kinds of apps can be helpful, but personally, I find it's better to learn vocabulary in context. Therefore, consuming content, reading, listening to podcasts, watching interviews, things like that, getting vocabulary in context helps me to remember that vocabulary a lot better. I also highly recommend you get a thesaurus on your computer, on your tablet, on your phone, whichever device you use more often. Whenever I'm writing something, whether it's an article for my blog, a YouTube video, I am always constantly, every day, honestly, without a doubt, I am opening my thesaurus and I am looking for different words that I can use. Words that are more impactful, words that are more precise, just different words to help me expand my vocabulary. And that is another way that will definitely help you widen your input and expand your vocabulary too. It's really about becoming conscious of what you put in your mind and then start to change it. This is really the only way you're going to be able to expand and improve your vocabulary. So once you've started exposing yourself to new vocabulary, then you will need to find a way to record it. And for this, you will need either a journal or a flashcard app. The journal is a method that I use over apps because I prefer to write down the words rather than enter it into an app and not write anything at all. I find the act of writing really helps me to retain and to remember the information a lot better. So I use word journals. I use a journal very much like what you see here, what I'm showing on the screen. Just a hardcover. These are journals from Moleskine, those types of journals. Are what I use to record my words in. And I generally have one journal per language. So one journal for the English words that I want to learn and I want to start using more. One journal for the Japanese words that I learn as I am studying Japanese, watching anime, things like that. And one journal for French language. So when I'm reading French articles, documents, things like that, as I pick up words and even phrases, I write those down in my word journal. So having a word journal is something I highly recommend you get if you're looking at expanding your vocabulary. And if you're like me and you prefer to write words down on paper rather than entering them into an app. And how I usually go about this is I write down the word that I have picked up through a movie, through a podcast interview, whatever the medium is. I write down the word, I write down the definition of that word, and I write down the synonyms. So in other words, other words that you could use instead of this word. So this really helps me to remember what the word is. It also helps me to put the word in a bit of context as well, and it makes it easier for me to use in my everyday communication. Writing words for me is the most effective way of remembering vocabulary so I can expand my vocabulary. I think it's because when you write down words, it employs multiple senses. You use your sight because you are looking at what you're writing. You use your touch because you are physically grabbing the pen or the pencil, writing that word down. It also employs the sound, your auditory senses, because if you say that word out loud as you write it down on the paper, that again helps you to retain information and to remember what that word is. So notebooks like this work really, really well for me. But if you are not into notebooks, if you're more of an app person, there are a couple of apps that I do recommend you get. One is called Anki Droid, so that is for Android phones. The other is called Anki Mobile, which I believe is for an iPhone. I don't have an iPhone, I have an Android phone, so I don't know much about iPhone apps, but those two apps are two of the most recommended apps for word learning. So the idea behind these apps is that you enter the words that you want into the flashcards on the app, and the app will present you those flashcards randomly so you can memorize them. You can be exposed to those new words. You can memorize them. You can refresh your memory as to what they are. By the way, I'm not an affiliate of either of these apps in any way. They are not sponsoring this video in any way. I'm simply letting you know about them because I know some of you watching might be more into apps rather than notebooks. And the way these apps are designed, they really do help you to retain the information a lot better, to memorize it a lot better, which is what we're going to talk about next. Number 3, memorize new vocabulary. When you learn anything new, It first goes into your short-term memory. So your short-term memory allows you to retain and to remember information that you have just learnt about. For example, information on a page that you just read. But the short-term memory is limited. It can't retain a lot of information, and it can't retain that information for a long period of time. This is explained really, really well by the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve, which mindtools.com explains as memories weaken over time. If we learn something new, but then make no attempt to relearn that information, we remember less and less of it as the hours, days, and weeks go by. So if you want to truly memorize new vocabulary or anything really at all, then you need to move it to your long-term memory. And in order to do this, you need to revise and relearn. There are a variety of methods that you can use to move what you have learned into your long-term memory. But one of the most popular tools is spaced repetition. So spaced repetition is where you repeat what you have learned at regular intervals. For example, when you learn new vocabulary, you need to repeat it and relearn it a number of times throughout that day, throughout the next day, throughout the next day, throughout the next week, and even the next month until you have committed it to your long-term memory. And it's when you have committed it to your long-term memory that you're able to retain that information and recall on it when you need it. So spaced repetition is a very, very effective memorization tool that is highly recommended for you to use when you're learning anything, whether it's vocabulary or studying for your science exam or your English exam. How do you use spaced repetition? So I'm going to explain some sequences that you can use right now. You can revise your word journal at the end of every day, go over the words that you've written for that day, memorize them, review them, relearn them. Do it at the end of every week, do it at the end of every month. Enter the words that you have written down into the flashcards using the apps that I suggested to you earlier in this video. Those apps quite often will use spaced repetition as part of their programming. Or you can create your own physical flashcards with the words that you want to learn and you want to expand your vocabulary with. There are many ways to use spaced repetition to help you memorize your new vocabulary, but what is really key is that you need to relearn, you need to repeat and revise what you have written down at regular intervals. Number 4, use new vocabulary. Now, it's great learning new vocabulary, it's great memorizing the new vocabulary, but if you don't use what you've learned, you won't commit it to your long-term memory. You won't be able to recall that vocabulary and use it when you need to. Using vocabulary that you've learned is an important part of the process where you make the shift to improving your speaking. At the end of the day, keeping those new words to yourself, it's not going to help you improve your speaking. It's not going to help you improve your communication and impress other people that you work with either. You need to start using the vocabulary. You need to start showing off to others that you have this fantastic new set of vocabulary in your mind. So how do you do that? There are a number of ways you can start using your new vocabulary. I'm going to share a variety of ways with you right now in the video, and these suggestions are focused on professionals. In your word journal, you can write down 1 to 3 sentences using the new word that you have learnt. Use the new word in an email, in a presentation at work. Include that new word in an article or in a social media post. Use the new word in conversation with colleagues. And take note of when other people use the new words that you have learned. The key here is to move that new word or those new words that you have learned into your vocabulary range. And when you move it into your vocabulary range, which is essentially your mental dictionary, that is when you are truly expanding your vocabulary. When you've used that word once, it is much, much easier to recall and to reuse later on. If you continue this process over time, you will have successfully broadened and amplified your vocabulary, improving your speaking. Think about it. If you learn one new word every day for an entire year, at the end of that year, you will have added 365 words to your mental lexicon. And if you don't know what lexicon means, then that should be the first word you add into your word journal. Here, you will see some related videos that you will absolutely enjoy, how to articulate complicated thoughts clearly and how to be more articulate. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will be back next week with another video.